Welcome to our third installment of Crypto Lunch. This week we're talking all things NFTs, and my God, has this space exploded. Chris, really quickly, NFTs. What are they? What's been happening in the world of NFTs recently?
The definition of NFT is non-fungible token. Today, really what NFTs are a online or on-blockchain representation of ownership. And it allows for people to prove that they have actually owned digital property. So you'll see things like Beeple with creating this digital art where people can, buy it for $69 million and show that they own that piece. And it goes down in history. You have proper provenance if you want to actually trade it from place to place. Or then you have Top Shot that is kind of like animated basketball cards. And it's really kind of just collectibles. Just a digital form of it that is actually much more, liquid because it's easier to trade a NFT across the world without having to actually physically hand somebody a Beanie Baby or a baseball card or anything of that sort, or even like a piece of art. And it's also actually much more, trusted because you can actually follow. It's much more transparent of where it started and how many times it passed hands. And yeah, that's kind of what NFTs are.
So that's kind of interesting the way you mentioned, property and art, and we're seeing a lot, of hype around, the art space. Are there any really good kind of like, examples of like the property side of things and it being really effective? And I guess like what's the benefit to, just the listener, like not anyone that's like, like that has kind of gone down their kind of like blockchain journey. They just want to know like how does it impact their lives, I guess, from a property perspective or an art perspective or collectibles even. How does it make their life better is really the question.
How does it make their life better? And truthfully, I might be a little bit of a skeptic of where NFTs are today, but I'm very long where NFTs are going. Today, what I like to kind of say is that today's NFTs are dumb NFTs, and air quoting, not because they're dumb. It's just that they don't do much. But where you will see it going is you'll start seeing, like I said, go back to showing ownership. When you're tying this to the real world, in the United States, we have issues with title ownership. Who actually does own your house? NFTs could be used to actually represent that in a very immutable, transparent way. In the future, you'll start seeing, I'm guessing probably actually in the matter of a few months, you'll start seeing what I call smart NFTs. NFTs actually do things. So not only do they show that you have ownership, but they can do things like generate yield, or they can allow you to, give you the keys, the DRM keys of a music album or a video, or NFTs that do things are really going to start making the world better, because what that does is it number one, it allows you to own the thing. Like say if you bought a song on where the kids buy songs now, like iTunes or what have you. And at this point, you can't really trade that from one person to another. But with the introduction of NFTs or in the blockchain, say you bought the rights to listen to a song. Now you have the ability to listen to the song anytime you want, but say you get sick of that song. Say if that song actually becomes rare. It's like there's only actually a certain amount of people have the ability to listen to that song. Now you can actually take that NFT, take the rights to own it, and you can trade it to somebody else for maybe more money than what you paid for, or even if it didn't go up in price, you actually get to recoup some cost. This is actually a major issue in the video game space, and there's entire markets around the physical thing. If you remember, like GameStop and like Funko Lands and all of these companies that dealt in the business of reselling physical video games. But of course, the physical video game is now really died because not many people actually buy physical video games anymore. People are buying the digital version. But with the NFTs, instead of buying just a copy of the video game, you actually buy the copy of the video game and then the rights to play it. Now there's all of a sudden a new like reseller video game market that you can then resell your video game back to somebody else so that somebody else can play it and you no longer can play it. Now, originally, like the creators of the video games were kind of like weren't really in love with the whole GameStop model because they never saw it. But with the NFTs and specifically smart NFTs, you now have the ability to generate yield or generate a commission on every single trade. So the original creator can actually hold the royalty ownership of an NFT, and then there could be a DRM or a playable version of this NFT, and that can be traded around or sold from one to another. And every time that it was sold from one person to another, a percentage of that sale could go back to the original creator. So this could go for video games. This could go for art. This could go for many different things. And it's if you really kind of open up your mind of the potential of what NFTs can be, we really are only at the actual tip of the iceberg. And what we are seeing today really is, I think, it's more of a fad. But this is one of those things, a fad that will actually seed an entire industry that would be better than what exists today.
Okay. So are we seeing gaming companies like actually activating this like on blockchain at the moment? You guys, I'm going to have a better view of people actually actively reaching out. But in our community, we're actually seeing video game developers come into our community to build blockchain games. Because it's like one of the things really kind of because there's actually multiple things that blockchain provides game developers. Number one, it removes a need for an active server for competitive games. Because right now in video games, you have to actually stand up a centralized server, and then somebody has to actually pay for that server to keep on going, and they eventually shut it down when they're not making enough money anymore because it costs money to run server. But with blockchain, it removes the server cost so that you can actually use blockchain as the backend, and then you're just passing around the actual client side so that you'll, as a game player, you kind of play as you use it. So it allows for a game to exist for eternity without having to trust somebody else to keep the lights on. That's one of the big benefits of blockchain gaming. And then if you tie that into collectibles and like smart NFTs, it becomes really exciting. So we're seeing a lot of people, traditional game developers come into the space and building. I mean, it's still early days, so it takes a long time to build games. So, but we're seeing that start. Yeah. Okay, and so I guess that there's been so much hype because it's now gone into mainstream media and like. People come up on the street and they're saying like NFTs, like tell me about them. And so Adi, I'm really interested, like what's exciting you at the moment about NFTs? And like, is this something, obviously like it's massive hype now because of this mainstream like information that we're getting, but like has it been kind of been building up for the last couple of years or what? Can you give me a little bit of history on it?
Yeah, I mean, so NFT, because obviously there's so much money that's involved in the purchases and transactions around those, but they've actually been in existence for quite a while. I mean, I think I minted my first NFT in 2017-ish, and that was sort of already when I felt like the beginning of the hype train had started. And there's been artists who have kind of been working on NFTs and trading them amongst ourselves for quite a few years. It's just that there wasn't necessarily this momentum or kind of social public quote-unquote consciousness of them, I think because there was not necessarily the fiat involved. But I think in a sense, like how should I say this? In a sense, kind of where crypto and traditional art overlay is their ability to really allow us as artists or collectors or patrons to be sort of skeptical about the present, especially in times of uncertainty like during the pandemics right now and sort of recessions that are happening in the US, while allowing people to literally bid on the future and like a hope of future. And so sort of where I think NFTs are getting exciting for me is the realization that so many people are, looking for something to rely on, almost like a belief system that the future is going to be, created in a way better. And sort of a lot of artists have been reaching out to me from my networks and kind of talking to me about the implications of this. And I think from a person who's like had traditional kind of gallery representation, there's been a lot of issues in terms of, for example, galleries typically get 50% of your sales, regardless of where they're done. So, and there's no secondary market percentage cuts for the artists, meaning that if a piece goes to auction at, say, Phillips or Christie's, traditionally, as an artist, you get none of that. So if you sell a piece to $20,000 to a collector, and then a few years later they sell it at Christie's for $2 million, you don't see a single penny of that. Basically all that revenue. And I think, so that's been exciting to sort of see these new economic monetary models coming out for artists in which they typically own a larger percentage of the cuts of their sales. So it's most of the NFT sites I've spoken with, it's closer to 80-20. There's obviously iterations and variations within that, but the advantage is you're getting that kind of right up front and immediately when it sells. And then a lot of them have secondary cuts in addition. But one thing that I've gotten really interested in and I'm quite excited about is sort of this notion of cross-chain NFT marketplaces. Because with the traditional proof of work chains, the minting or gas fees are quite expensive. And I believe that sort of threatens the long-term health of those ecosystems. But looking at people and groups from, these proof of work chains or these proof of stake chains or pure proof of stake chains, there's a few people that are coming around and thinking about kind of cross-chain interoperability in terms of NFT platforms and how that essentially solves kind of displays liquidity, utility, so on and so forth. And so that's something I've been really starting to pay a lot of attention to is sort of further decentralizing and open sourcing sort of the models in which we're not creating these silos of, some people are on this chain, other people are on that chain, and we can't necessarily kind of cross-pollinate. So I've been mostly kind of excited about that potential oracle or, linking tokens with identifiers and ways to basically represent those assets in ways that aren't being currently represented and creating a more decentralized system.
That's a very, that's very interesting. They think about the cross-chain. And I just think of like one way that you could really do it is building into the NFT structure itself, a way to burn the actual NFT. So actually it goes away and then be able to actually then on the new chain recreate it. So it kind of like atomic swap from one to another by destroying the actual existence of it on the previous chain.
Right.
Another thing kind of like to kind of build on the royalties that they hit on, Addie, is about, artists making money from every sale after that, which I think is really awesome. The next level of that is by instead of actually having individual like single royalty ownership, you have fund royalty ownership. And what this does is it allows for the artists or the creators of the NFT to be able to fundraise by selling a portion of the future royalties of it. Say that a artist says, I go and paint a picture of dogs playing poker, and it's going to be really awesome. And you know my history, and I'm going to sell 20% of the future royalties right now, so I can eat and have money right now. And when the actual NFT is then sold, the investors get 20%, the original owners get 80%, and then every trade after that, it's 20. Like it goes into a fund rather than a single owner. And the great part about this is it kind of ties into the whole systems thinking and the game theory, where now there's multiple owners, and the actual royalty tokens themselves are now liquid. You can actually trade them on the open market, but the holders of the future royalties of that piece are now incentivized to promote that piece. So now they're out there doing work for free, but not free because they're actually because it increases the value of that NFT that they are part ownership in, to make sure that other people know about it. And it's another thing that the blockchain makes better than what currently exists today.
And so it's kind of...
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, sorry, Eddie. No, go on. You keep on chatting there about that, because I have another question after that.
One thing that I started to look into is sort of the implications of ownership as an NFT token holder, and sort of how generally those point to a URL on the internet or like an IPFS hash, and how in most circumstances that NFT is actually referencing like an IPFS gateway on the internet run by, say, like the startup platform that you bought it from, versus it actually being something that is truly autonomous. And I was wondering, kind of, Chris, like from your perspective as someone who's a little bit deeper into the developing sense of things, like, so if you look at that and then you see that, okay, this file is actually referring to this media file, which is actually hosted by like the server of the company in which you bought it from, which implies essentially, like, my conclusion was sort of, okay, so if this platform provider goes bust, basically the token is essentially worthless, as it was referring to nothing. If that hash is basically just redirecting to that IPFS.
Right. So that would be the way that I would say never to build an NFT, because you are now centralizing a beautiful decentralized thing. The better way of going about it is to hash or store the MD5 of the image, or whatever it is, because an NFT is not like that's a great thing to make sure that people know, is that you're not actually trading around the actual thing. You are trading around the representation of the ownership of that thing. And what you need to do in this NFT is somehow identify the thing that you're trading, but not necessarily pointing exactly what it is, because we're in a digital world, things can be replicated multiple times. So the idea is that you would hash the representation to identify an existing thing that can be stored multiple different places. You could even do something with an NFT of having a mutable metadata in it that points to multiple locations where it could be stored. So if it does go away at one place or another, if it's on IPFS or Siacoin or even like S3 or like stored, it doesn't, or even locally, like you could say I actually have this locally and I'm good with that. But the idea is that this NFT that I'm trading around, all that is not a point to actually where it is, but it's a identifier of the thing that I am owning.
Right. I mean, I guess that comes back to this kind of overall concept that value is essentially a construct.
Yeah, for sure.
So I have a kind of a question, because I know, like, I got a lot of artists, and I know, Addie, that you are engaging a lot with artists as well. Some of the artists, might not necessarily be tech savvy. And that's no offense to any artists. I'm sure there are plenty of artists who are. But I guess it's like, a lot of them might be managed by a talent manager. And I've also had like a talent manager kind of reach out to me. Like what do you advise like artists who are, I guess, non-tech savvy versus the artist that, that is? What kind of advice do you give them?
I mean, my advice is purely around, like, they don't have to be, they shouldn't have to be. It's the duty of the developers to be able to hide tech from non-tech savvy people. I mean, if you go and ask any of the artists right now, or the majority of them wouldn't be able to describe to you how the internet works. But they can probably upload their song pretty easily, and that's really kind of where we are as the developers of the world that come in. We need to make sure that we have tools to make it very easy to mint NFTs, to actually declare ownership of something. This is something that I know that there's a team working on specifically for Outbrand that is building an NFT generator that is simply a single page application that allows for anybody to open up, connect their Algo wallet to, upload an image. It will automatically hash that image, create a unique identifier for it, stores it somewhere, and then transfers the ownership to the wallet that was connected. And now at that point, that NFT is created. Now they have the ability to then trade it to anybody else. And this is all without having to know exactly what's happening behind the scenes, because they shouldn't have to. It's very much blockchain usability shouldn't be any harder than what the internet usability is today.
Yeah, I mean, I think also that's one of the major reasons why it's so ubiquitous right now, and where we're seeing so many artists on board, is because they've really successfully obfuscated sort of the complexities around blockchain. And they've made, like Chris said, they've made it sort of this thing that functions, essentially like Instagram. You upload your image, you press a button to mint it, you put in your money, which you can pay with even using a credit card. So you're not reliant on even necessarily having an existing wallet or crypto cash. And it's minted instantly. And then it's sort of this, it feels like a lottery. And then I think what's fed into it even more is this media fanfare around artists making, millions of dollars, and the sense that that's been an immediate thing, that they came out of nowhere. And sort of in reality, some of the artists that are really doing well have actually been building out their communities and their followings for the last decade. And sort of the instant fame thing has been, 10 years in the making. And sort of, in addition, I think with the pandemic, people are locked up at home. Galleries and museums have been essentially closed for the last year. And so artists have been really hurting to find alternative means of income that don't, necessarily mean they have to completely transfer their careers or change professions. And sort of this is the perfect storm in some sense.
And from a tech aspect, that's, I'm really interested in, supporting and getting that built out and building out the ecosystem around the developers. But I guess, there is that risk, obviously, of, this NFT hype. And I guess is it a case that only time will tell, which ones will land and which ones will, be profitable? Or is that the beauty of the NFT space, is that, the ones that are profitable are the ones with the most beauty? Or is it just random? Because it is quite mad, the ones that are doing really well versus ones that are, artists who are building up massive following. Addie, can you kind of talk a little bit around that?
Yeah, I mean, there's not a short answer for that, because art is so subjective, unfortunately or fortunately, and sort of, like I said, value is a construct, and unfortunately, again, art is a really good example of that. And sort of the artists that are most successful aren't necessarily the most talented, but they might have the largest following, or the richest collectors who are supporting them and patroning their art. And sort of looking at it from a macro scale, in my experience, has made the art world make a lot more sense. There's artists that have been at galleries, which represented me, that seemed very successful, but it was because they had some sense. What I hope to see with NFTs and sort of crypto art markets in general is sort of the ability to create a democratization of art, in the sense that prior to essentially kind of this boom, it's been very much part of the religion of art, is that you have to be in a city, you have to be in a metropolitan area, you need to be represented by metropolitan galleries, or you're not a viable artist. And this has sort of ripped that open in a way. And it's bringing people into the space from all over the world who have the ability to kind of access the computer or access a decent graphics card to make the works. And that's really has the potential, I think, to disrupt the art world. And now the question is, what happens post-COVID? Is this something that is sustainable? And sort of looking at the platforms in which I think are more centered around artists versus centered around profit will eventually be the ones that will be sustained.
Yeah, I think it's actually a really good point, Eddie. Is that, but the kind of the pushback is that we're asking this question around blockchain, but this is not a blockchain problem at all. This is just real world problems. How do you determine the value of anything? If anything, blockchain makes the situation more open and even more variable, because everything you just said, there's even you don't have as many restrictions that you do in the real world, but you still have the same definitions of what is the value. I mean, at the end of the day, right, the value of anything is what somebody will give you for it.
Exactly.
Chris, do you have any like questions that you want, like that you've been kind of like that are milling around in your head around NFTs, and are like where like there's also the piece where we're kind of busying away like on the tech side. Is there anything else that we can be doing? Like I suppose creating a space for artists to be able to kind of come, because it is that like intersection of creativity and tech, which is such. I mean, I'm so excited that there is that intersection, because me personally, it's lovely to be able to even talk about art when you're working in the tech space. Like, do you have any kind of recommendations, like for people who are heavy in on tech, and then hey, actually we should be broadening our scope and like who we should be talking to?
I mean, so I have a lot of thoughts. I mean, this is something I've been spending a lot of time recently thinking about and getting on my soapbox a lot about. The potential of NFTs is way beyond art. It's really like NFTs will apply to anything that can be owned, which is everything, or most things at least. It's just how creative or how innovative the individuals are about it. But this actually goes back to one of my things I get on my soapbox about, is that if you look at Ethereum, where a lot of the NFTs live today, is that you have these NFT standards, or even like just tokenized standards. And I personally believe that the ERC 721 is actually like a standard of what an NFT is detrimental for the future of NFTs, because the standardizing something at this stage will only hurt innovation. And the benefits of standardizing something at this stage are, I think, at best imaginary. And I worry about the industry kind of painting NFTs into a corner and say, this is what an NFT is because this is what the standard is, so we have to follow the standard, and kind of be shackled to that belief. And when in reality, NFTs have the potential to like revolutionize, like I said, just ownership in general. So the thing that I worry most about is actually standards, like standardizing what NFTs are today, rather than letting them be free and letting them be what they need to be able to be innovative. This is like, saying that a database has to have a standard, has to have a structure that you're not allowed to actually create free-form tables in a database. You have to actually build your tables in this format, or else people won't be able to read from them. Honestly, that's BS, because the scope of what NFTs will be in the grand scheme of things is so broad that every different NFT will have a completely different structure, because they have different abilities, they have different things that they need to do. And so that's the one thing that I'm, when people are starting to talk and getting interested in NFTs, is stop thinking about what NFTs are today and start thinking about the potential what NFTs could be, and don't shackle to yourself of these antiquated standards that were put into existence to kind of seed this new revolution, but really keep an open mind of what you believe that the future of ownership could be.
And like, so just on your point, Chris, how do you think that NFTs will benefit you?
I mean, I think that I'm getting really emotional, passionate about this, is that I see that by what NFTs will do. I don't even like calling them NFTs, honestly, but we'll call them NFTs just because that's what people think of them as. But what digital ownership will do is that on a blockchain is it removes the overhead that is required for indexing actual ownership that will allow you to actually to truly own everything, both digital and physical, in an immutable and tradable way that will allow you to be able to do things and resell things and have proper provenance on more than just the super expensive stuff. Like right now, you have titles for a house and car just because of how expensive they are. But in the future, I can see most things actually having a digital representation of who actually owns it, and I can see a world because of that. We go back to the way of building things that last rather than build things that you just throw away when you're done, because you have the entire ability to resell it in an easy, open way, and actually be able to have good faith that the thing that you're buying is the thing that you expect it to be. So that's kind of like how I actually think about where NFTs will go, is that it will completely revolutionize what ownership is, period.
Right. So, sorry, I just have a question here. I'm sorry to kind of change tack on that, because I'd really like to kind of like actually get you to answer that afterwards. But I got a question here around money laundering. Do you see NFTs as making that problem bigger or smaller?
Money laundering?
Yeah, like how will like NFTs, like where does it play its part?
I mean, so art in general, from the traditional sense, is one of the primary means of money laundering and is established as such. But the thing about NFTs, I would say, / blockchains that changes that, or which I would argue is actually helps prevent money laundering, is that they are fully transparent, which I mean is publicly viewable by anyone by simply searching the address of a given transaction using something like a blockchain explorer. And so this is really, in my opinion, very useful for increasing accountability, as it allows people to supervise and sort of track the transactions across the chain. So in the case of like a traditional banking system, the transactions are made and recorded, but those can be easily manipulated and tampered with internally because of the lack of transparency around transactions, both the general public and even people within that system who don't have, access to the security access to those specific areas of, sorry, my kids just came in, security access to those specific areas. And so I would argue, if anything, it actually, lends to more accountability and more exposure, and people being less likely to manipulate it.
Okay, cool. Thanks, Addie. I'm sorry about all the swapping about here, because I'm getting questions here on Discord. Chris, regarding standards, couldn't you standardize the current usage but still build new things compatible on top of that? What are you saying? Is it like saying standardization of TCP/IP? Would it make it harder to come up with UDP and newer protocols while history doesn't show it?
So the level of at what level of abstraction you standardize? I don't believe that NFTs themselves are at low enough abstraction to require standardization. Obviously, I think that you standardize a much lower aspect of it, where you standardize maybe the blockchain transactions or how things are actually transactions on blockchain. But it's like the way that I look at it is like, you can't say, standardizing NFTs is like, standardizing TCP. It's more like, the way I look at it is like standardizing NFTs would be like standardizing how applications on the web work. I mean, that just doesn't make sense. You don't need to. Their NFTs themselves are much more fluid, and they're going to be doing much more have much more logic baked into it. So standardization is important, but at a low level, not at the level of what NFTs are.
Okay.
I'm reading the thing.
So, are you reading it as well?
He says, we have standardized web application, DOM, HTML, and JS. That's once again, those are too low level. I see those like DOM, HTML, and JS would be like Teal is, and Teal is standardized across all of algorithms. The NFTs themselves are the applications that are built on top of that. So you don't have standardized web applications. You have standardized protocols that they are built on top of. And that's why what I'm saying is that the ERC 721, or the actual standardization of an NFT, NFTs themselves are applications. They're just storage. And so that's my main pushback, is that you're still talking at a completely different level of abstraction.
I mean, in a way, that kind of comes back to this whole ownership question. It's a question I've received quite often, is sort of, what is the notion of ownership in crypto art, and how, maybe you know more about this, Chris, but something that I've spoken to with IP or intellectual property lawyers is that basically, as an owner of that crypto right, it confers no actual rights other than being able to say that you essentially own that work. So you don't, for example, in the copyright, you don't get a physical edition of the work for the majority of these sales, and anyone can access the image, take a screenshot of it, and repost it on the web. So this is basically, an NFT is essentially like a public database record saying that you own the work, but what it really says is you're sort of owning like this specific URL or an alphanumeric hash that references the work. And sort of, I think in a way, the whole NFT notion of ownership is something I've really been thinking a lot about, and sort of what that essentially extrapolates or means to me was that is sort of the value we place on attributes as a choice, which is something I know we were speaking to earlier. It's like, so why would anyone buy crypto art and spend millions on something that is essentially a link to a JPEG file?
No, you're completely right. That is the state of things today. But I think one of those things, the way that I look at it is that's where we are today. Tech is ahead of law, and it is one of those things where I believe that the future law will create a structure around what the truth of what the blockchain says. You're like, I mean, you look at Top Shot right now, you don't actually own anything. You own a piece of data that says that you own, or you own that actual reference to that image, which blows my mind. People are spending so much money on, because you don't actually own you can't even actually have the copy of that thing that you air quotes again, own. But I do think that there is a different types of future where there are different types of ownership, where there is royalty ownership, there is DRM ownership, there is actual IP ownership, and it's different types of ownership, and there is, once again, no standard of what type of a single NFT.
Where do you see sort of I've noticed quite a few NFT sites that are moving towards like fractional ownership of NFTs, and I'm curious from sort of a developer standpoint what you've seen on the developer side. Are people thinking about that already, or is it already further? Is it quite implemented along and it just hasn't been pushed onto the platforms?
I mean, this goes back to like what I was saying earlier, or actually mixed with what I just said and what I said earlier, is that what's the definition of ownership? Is it is it DRM ownership? Is it future royalty ownership? Is it IP ownership? And like what type of ownership that is? But then it goes back to what I said, is rather than having an individual ID that represents that type of ownership, you have a fund, a tokenized collection of tokens that each token has a representation of that portion of the overall fund. And that's how I envision it as far as technically goes. Legally, I don't know exactly how that will work, but I hope that what laws should eventually do is adapt to the real world application of things. But I can't really speak to that.
Yeah. Is there anywhere like that's kind of speaking to, because I know, we're all aware that there's like massive hype now around NFTs and digital art, but is there any kind of like place that's like writing about NFTs in a more philosophical sense of like what this means in the future? Can you point us to anywhere?
No.
Or is it just like scary?
Maybe Eddie knows, but like me, it's fever dreams. At night, I think about the potential of what they can be. So I don't read anything anymore.
I totally understand that. I don't read anything anymore. Yeah, there isn't right now, but there's a curator whose name is Dr. Tina River Ryan, and I believe, is a curator of modern contemporary art at Albert Knox in New York. And I know she's doing a really comprehensive sort of research taxonomy of NFTs. I was just looking to see.
Oh, cool!
Trying to see if it was amazing. Already up. Because she had contacted me a week or two ago about it. Let's see. It's not up yet, but I'm very interested in what she has to say, because she's looking at it from like an anthropological, but also an art history perspective. So once that's up, I'm happy to pass it to our Twitter master and have it pushed out to the network.
Amazing. That'd be because I think, everyone's like really excited now, and, people are really benefiting from it, but it's just like, I guess just like planning for the, like, what's next down the line with NFTs, and seeing like what's the benefits and how can people jump on and get involved, and which kind of like what areas it'll disrupt the most. I think it's really fascinating, and I don't know, like, I've been in this space for nearly 3 years, and it's just such a pleasure that people actually are able to kind of like refer to something in mainstream media you're working around. It's really cool.
So true. It's like, okay, finally it's not magic internet money, but there's something tangible that people can grab onto.
Exactly. Chris, do you have any kind of like final thoughts, or are you good? Are we good to jump off?
I mean, I always have thoughts. So if you ever want to get my opinion on anything, I'll gladly tell it, even though I have no idea what I'm talking about. One thing I will say, though, and actually kind of tied to exactly what I said, is that this space is the closest thing we have to like the pioneers and the early explorers. Is that most people, actually everybody in this space right now, has no idea what they're talking about, because there is no future. There's nothing actually that's been proven at all yet. So, and like everything that you hear online or from what people like me say or anything, is that you have to actually kind of take into consideration, but not as gospel, because like we're all figuring shit out right now. Like we're thinking really hard, and we're talking to the right, like, smart people, but the future is unplanned. The way we're the ancient explorers standing in Europe right now, saying, I'm going to go that way, and I think I need 3 months worth of supplies, but I have no idea what's over there. So I have an idea of the direction I'm going, but we'll figure it out when we get there. And that is the space. And things are moving so fast that the thing that I'm saying today might be complete bullshit in a month, because of all the new learnings that we've learned, just because there is no standard. We're doing things today that have never been done before, or have the ability to be done before. So keep, like, there's, I don't know how many people are listening here, but keep listening, keep involving, keep giving your own opinions, because the utmost experts that you hear in this space are absolute full of shit, because there's no way to know for sure what the truth is.
Right. And Addie, do you have any final thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I amen actually what Chris says. I can't even say it better, so it's over.
Okay, I think that's a good time to finish the NFT discussion. Guys, thank you so much. I really appreciate, Addie, I know that you were off today, so I appreciate you jumping in on this. And Chris, thank you also for jumping in last minute. Great, thanks so much, guys.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Joanna. Thank you, Addie.